Okay, welcome everyone to Brhat Bhagavatamrta. So let's offer some prayers to Srila Prabhupada before we begin. Namo Om Vishnu Badhaya Krishna Bastaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namane. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Vachaline. Sisha Sunyavhari Pashtatar Satarine. Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda. Jai Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sari Gaura Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare. Now I'm trying to remember while I'm searching, while I'm just going to share the screen. Can anyone just give us a reminder of what subject we're reading about at the moment? Because I can't remember. I'm ashamed to say. Although I'll probably look at the verse and I will be reminded.
The Bhakti, what are they called? Impersonalist and the Vedantist are talking to each other.
Oh, that's it. It's quite a dissertation on the philosophy of Brahmavad or Mayavad, and a comparison is being made with that in Bhakti, specifically about the bliss obtained in Bhakti compared to the paltry amount of bliss obtained just through liberation, etc. Like that. And for some reason, oh, there it is, yeah. And here it is, as the happiness found in devotional service is much greater. Yeah, okay, right. So let's read Brhat Bhagavatamrta, text 216, unless I'm mistaken. We're on that. Someone like to begin? And it's quite
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Shall I read?
Yes, go ahead. It's a little bit technical, so in order for not just for your sake and for my sake as well, it's good if we can try as best as possible to understand what's being explained. I remember last week some of the philosophical points that were brought up were quite subtle, and it took a couple of readings to really understand it. But anyway, let's try our best.
Okay,
yes, go ahead, Mom.
Thus, the happiness found in devotional service is much greater than in the liberation born of samadhi, and by the mercy and sweetness of the Lord, so affectionate to his devotees, that devotional happiness expands. Commentary. The personality of Godhead is always enjoying his infinitely varied pastimes, and he likes to share his enjoyment as much as possible. Because the Lord is very kind and so exceedingly attractive, his devotees feel transcendental ecstasy. The spiritual potency of the soul is limited. Although he is such Chit Ananda, eternal, conscious, and blissful, simply to realize those qualities provides merely a static, monotonous kind of spiritual existence. But when the soul goes beyond mere self-realization to realize his relationship with the all-compassionate Lord, the Lord's divine energies bestow upon him incomparable happiness.
Okay, let me just read this sentence here again. The spiritual potency of the soul is limited. Although he is Satchit Ananda, eternal, conscious, and blissful. Simply to realize those qualities provides merely a static, monotonous kind of spiritual existence. Okay, so that's realization without service to the Lord, without devotional service. Yeah.
The spiritual potency of the Lord is limited, right?
The spiritual potency of the soul is limited.
So is this comparing with the super soul, like, Krishna is unlimited, and so the us lot are limited.
Us lot, yeah. For sure. Yeah, in comparison to him who is unlimited.
Yes.
Yeah, we have very limited spiritual. We have spiritual, at least it's admitted we have some potency, but it's very limited. The example is given like the spark, isn't it?
Yeah.
Has the qualities of the fire, is coming from the fire, but in very small, minute quality. And also the examples given of a drop of water.
And ocean.
Has the qualities of the ocean, but in a small quantity. Yeah. So Krishna's existence is based on pleasure. Yeah, pleasure, pastimes. Yeah. And we as soul are supposed to be dovetailed with that in service to him. But in our illusion, we are trying to experience bliss without Krishna. And instead we're tasting bitterness. Yeah. Okay, any other comments here? You can read Han, Mother Anupama.
Okay. Text
Yeah.
217. That extraordinary happiness is always one, yet it assumes many features. It stands in contrast to the happiness of impersonal liberation. Devotional happiness is made of the intense sweetness of sporting pastime in the highest devotional service to the Lord. Persons unfamiliar with this pleasure cannot even imagine what it is like. Commentary. The experience of bhakti includes Brahman realization. So the bhakti experience shares the non-dual nature of Satchit Ananda. But because bhakti is also a special opulence of the personality of Godhead, it is blissful in a way that merging into the Supreme can never be. And the happiness of impersonal liberation, one and unchanging, the liberated soul attains a limit in which he thinks himself fully satisfied. The ecstasies of devotional service, however, in their many different features, never reach a point beyond which they cannot further increase, and so they destroy the limited feeling of self-satisfaction. In an apparently contradictory way, the bliss of devotion is uniformly Satchit Ananda, yet always increasing in manifold varieties, newer and newer, sweeter and sweeter at every moment. Such is the glory of the Lord's devotional service. It is irrepressibly attractive and therefore has the power to do what seems impossible. These contradictions, coexisting in the bliss of bhakti, that is always one, yet full of variety, limitless, yet constantly growing, can never be understood by those who have not tasted it for themselves.
Yeah, okay. Any appreciations here or comments no one would like to make?
Yeah, the experience of bhakti includes Brahman realization.
Mm.
So the bhakti, so from the Brahman realization all the way to Paramatma realization, Bhagwan realization.
Mm.
What was it? It's really like Satchit Ananda. It's really blissful. I mean, what I'm trying to say is like it's blissful even in Brahman realization because it's really important. So can you imagine what it's going to be like when you become realize the
when you see Krishna?
yeah, when you realize Bhagwan realization.
Yeah. So yeah, very good point. So Brahman realization is a specific experience that releases one from, as it says in the Bhagavad Gita, one is free from all hankering and lamentation. Because one realizes the spiritual, the extraordinary spiritual dimension or the spiritual essence of the whole of creation. And they understand it to be more than just what they understand the world to be more than what just meets the eye. There's something extra special about it, something extraordinary about what looks to be ordinary. So that experience lifts them out of pursuit for material endeavors. Yeah, they're completely in wonder. That's Brahman realization. Yeah. So, and it's an aspect of God realization, but it's just the beginning. But that realization comes as a general course of experience by rendering devotional service. Krishna will give devotees that experience just by rendering devotional service to one degree or another. And even it's said in Bhagavad Gita is that it's on that platform that you can actually start to render devotional service to the Lord. So devotees are no doubt on the Brahman platform and beyond. Yeah. But it's also, sometimes we might read this, but that's why it's good to stop sometimes and reflect on what's being explained here. Because our experience in the material world, there is always a limit. Yeah. Like if you have a cup, there's only so much water you can put in the cup. Yeah. If you're eating a meal, there's only so much you can fit in your stomach, despite your best effort, you know. There's only oh God. You didn't hear that, did you? That okay, I've got some silly thing going on my computer. Try to ignore it. And yeah, so where was I before? Yeah. So, you know, if you go on a journey, you're gonna at some point you're gonna come to the end of your journey. Or okay, you can go around the world, but you're going to become exhausted. Yeah, or your funds will become exhausted. Yeah, even if you enter into a relationship, say a marriage, you know, then it's as much as you may think and dream it's going to be unlimited happiness. It isn't going to be like that. It's going to reach its limit, you know, and the enjoyments people try to have in this world, and you could say, oh, happiness itself. They're desperately trying to experience their original nature of unlimited joy, but they can't find it in the binds and the temporary nature of this world. Now, all of that now the experience of bhakti completely goes against that. It goes like, even I think I mentioned before, this is on my mind lately, that even the material world, how great it is, it has its end. It has its limits. Everything in our existence has its limits, but not the bliss of bhakti. It's quite amazing if we think of it like that. It's constantly growing. Nothing else constantly grows. Nothing else constantly expands. Even anxiety, at some point, I'm sorry to say that you're going to experience happiness. Even anxiety has limits, there's a mixture. So this is quite, this phenomena is quite inconceivable, even to us to one degree or another. Yeah? So the bliss it described is constantly growing. It's ever fresh. Yeah? It describes here, full of variety, limitless, yet constantly growing. And that's what we're hankering for here in this material world. As souls, we hanker for that experience, but we won't get it here. It's not to be had, not in this world. Only that relationship with Krishna, we can experience it, and in the spiritual world. Yeah. Anything upon that? Hopefully bhakti sounds attractive by reading these.
It does, because that paragraph, what we just read, and
Yeah.
like the happiness, impersonal happiness is like emerging and you finished. You know, that's it.
Yeah, yeah.
Whereas in the devotional, it's unlimited. You will, okay, we can only go to a certain place in this material world, but when you do go back, it's unlimited. You can go further
Yeah.
and further and further.
unbound and unlimited.
Yeah. Today I was listening to a class and he said, we're going like 9 stages. Is it 9 stages?
Yeah,
Routine.
we've described it quite many times in our classes,
Yeah.
isn't it? Readings.
Yeah. But today I heard in a class that it's not just 9, it's 14.
All right.
Yeah. I
What's
can't.
what's the other ones?
Oh,
There's different. They might be including the different levels of prema.
yeah. Yeah. And plus, those are the ones that you would get when you go back home.
Yeah, there's different developments of prema goes through different stages as well. Pranaya, I forget what it, Pranaya, Sneha, Pranaya, like that.
Yes.
Mahabhav, like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have.
Narad Muni and how, then he goes further.
Yes.
Yeah. So devotion is unlimited.
Yeah, so you say there's 4 okay, so we've established there's 14, but still it's not as if you get there's no getting to the end of it.
No.
There's no getting the end of it. All right, Hare Krishna. Let's read text 218. Anupama, you can read again, unless someone else would like to read. You can go ahead.
Okay, 218. For the Lord Vishnu is always one and unchanging. At every moment, he brings forth hundreds of newer and newer varieties of transcendental charm, both in himself and in his devotional service. He does this by his personal energy, inconceivable to everyone else. Commentary. Text 218 through 220 establish beyond a doubt that although the Supreme Lord, as the personal embodiment of the Absolute Truth, is unchanging in his Satchit Ananda existence, he and his activities and his devotion and theirs are full of variety that is real, not created by illusion. Non-devotees can never discover this sublime truth by conjecture. They can never understand the Lord's pastimes with his devotees.
Okay.
I think this is what we've just discussed, haven't we, really?
Yes. Varieties, is unlimited. This is the internal energy, the Lord's personal energy.
Yeah.
Okay, you can read the next one.
219. This manifold charm, sweeter than the sweetest, is found in Sri Vishnu's supremacy as Brahman and his lordship over all that be. His charm displays the very limit of his most excellent compassion towards his devotees. For them, his charm lifts to the highest stage the experience of deep oceans of sweet ecstasy. Ecstasy that ridicules the pleasure derived from realization of impersonal Brahman. Commentary. This is the difference between the impersonal Supreme and the personality of Godhead, between liberated impersonalists and pure devotees of the Lord, between liberation and devotional service. Lord Vishnu is the original Brahman, the one without a second, but his attractive qualities are evolving constantly with ever new freshness. Is the Supreme Person, the controller of everything that exists. His personal beauty and wonderful playful activities are universally attractive.
Yeah. That's why we have experiences here being bored. Has anyone ever been bored before? Bored. Yeah. We can't quite, it doesn't satisfy the soul, this world. It may give some, because it has the Shakti of being new, at some point it becomes hackneyed and old, So, yeah, I think I mentioned before, I remember that was one of the issues we had as young teenagers, just bored. So we do all types of things to try and break that boredom. Anyway, the point here is that, the comparisons being made again and again to the impersonal so-called experience of freedom, moksha, freedom from the binds of the material world, that doesn't compare at all to the bliss that's experienced in devotional service. Yeah. Evolving. I often give the example, Sophie, you've heard me say this many times before, and normally in lunch classes I give it. If you have a chewing gum, you heard that we say that so many times, and it never loses its flavor. You just keep chewing. You can be chewing it in 20 years, and the flavors got deeper and deeper and deeper. And you're experiencing flavors you never dreamed existed before. Okay. Is there such a chewing gum? There's not.
Ask Krishna to create one.
Yeah.
So now there is a fault in the creation. There isn't a chewing gum like that.
There's what?
There is not a chewing gum like that.
No.
Created.
Anyone read Charlie in the Chocolate Factory? As a book, it probably is his children's story, Charlie in the Chocolate Factory. And they made this chocolate which never ever lost its flavor. You know, it's a dream.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's why the residents of the spiritual world are so full of compassion. You know, actually, people suffer here greatly, isn't it?
Mm.
And compared to, well, yeah, that's why devotees are very compassionate. Because people think they're happy, but they're not. This is real happiness that's being described here. You know. Yeah, there's a verse in Bhagavatam describes that the Lord situated in devotee's heart makes everything increasingly fresh for a devotee. His activities of Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu should be increasingly refreshing and uplifting. Yeah. If it's not, then perhaps we're doing it wrong, or perhaps we're not being attentive. Yeah. That's when we that's when we may experience it to have, because the holy name doesn't have any material attributes to it. It is completely spiritual. And the soul has an attraction to Krishna who's non-different from his holy name. So when we don't have a taste for the holy name, it's not the holy name, it means us, we're distracted, or we've distanced ourselves by an offensive mentality towards the Lord, towards the holy name, or towards the devotees. But the experience actually should be that it's increasingly fresh. But we're so conditioned souls that we're so dull that we still madly think we can find happiness and relief from the details of this world. Yeah. Somehow now we're conditioned. Hopefully we get the message at some point and just go towards Krishna 24 hours a day for our upliftment and our sustenance and our shelter. You know, there's something in the chat here. Nemo Mata, we are used to chewing the chewed. Yeah, so the other side of that. Yeah, we're trying to get flavor from the same old thing, you know. Punapanas chavata chavananam. It's a verse from 7th canto. Punapanas chavananam, chewing the chewed. Prabhupada would often recite this in relation to sex life in the material world, you know. Trying. Anyway, we won't go further down that direction. All right, anything else from here? Okay, it's a long Sanskrit verse here. Does anyone else like to read out there?
I can read.
Go ahead, 220.
220. The Lord expands abundant varieties to enrich his devotees forever with enjoyment in his exuberant waves of sweet ecstasy. And just as, even though he is devoid of every kind of material trade, there is firm and constant variety in him, So in his devotees, there is a strong and varied and wonderful experience in all the functions of the senses. Commentary. Why does the Lord, Supreme Lord, expand the diverseness of his personality? He does so for the pleasure of his devotees. The Lord's attractive qualities expand infinitely, giving the devotees who are equally spiritual beings many different kinds of opportunities to serve him by activities like hearing and chanting. This spiritual varieties in devotional service expands perpetually, with no beginning or end. It manifests itself in the Lord and also in his devotees, enhancing their beauty, effulgence, and enjoyment, and enlivening and empowering their senses. Because fire is always hot, it can never become cold. So, how can the supreme spiritual truth, eternally and changelessly one, paradoxically exhibit so much diversity? The second half of this verse answers that doubt. Although the Supreme Lord is untouched by material dualities, his transcendental nature creates in him profuse diversity, which constantly expands, unlimited by time or space. Although the Lord, the Supreme Brahman, is nirvishesha, free from duality, he displays infinite variety by appearing as innumerable avatars, as the supersoul in every heart, and also in his limited expanses, the jivas and the material energy. He also expands the countless forms of devotional service, hearing and chanting about him, seeing him, conversing with him, embracing him, completely these completely enchant his devotee with endless varieties of pleasure, newer and newer at every moment. By employing his personal energies, the Lord expands himself with ever fresh variety to give his devotees special happiness, far exceeding the happiness of realizing the self as one with him. He similarly offers an infinite variety of engagement for the external and internal senses of his devotees to add spice to their transcendental pleasure. Thus, in spiritual life, there is non-difference within difference and difference within non-difference. Without a doubt, the happiness of liberation is paltry compared to the supreme happiness of devotional service. We need not elaborate on this point any further.
Okay. Any think here from anyone? I like this sentence here very much. The beginning of the verse, the Lord expands abundant variety to enrich his devotees forever with enjoyment in these exuberant waves of sweet ecstasy. Yep. So this is all obviously the internal energy of the Lord. Yep.
Yeah, but we so limited that how much you start off in the day, you want to do so much for Krishna. But at the end of the day, you find that you just can't do as much as you want to do. You know?
Yeah. But there's two aspects. There's Cheta Rupa and there's Bhava Rupa. I guess when a spiritual body, Cheta Rupa means the engagement of the external senses in this context with service to the Lord. You know, you may cook something for the Lord, but you can't cook 100 Raj Bhogas in one day, for example.
Yeah.
You may dress the Lord, but you've only got one deity to dress once a day. So that's the Chesta Rupa. No doubt you could dress the Lord for eternity, So in that sense, it's unlimited on the spiritual platform, what goes on in the spiritual world. The different varieties of service to Krishna, the different varieties of flowers in the spiritual world. Yeah, and it's unlimited. But what is more deep and more unlimited is the experience of devotion. The emotion of devotion is something which is it's something which is unlimited. Yeah, the experience of appreciating the beauty of Krishna, for example, that is unlimited. Yeah, so we can always, okay, we may be limited by the amount of service we may be able to offer the Lord, but unlimited is to the degree that we can be absorbed in a devotional mellow. You understand?
Mm.
So, for instance, you could be cooking and you could be absorbed in all types of meditations, for instance, the cooking in the spiritual world, for example. So it's actually, so and our chanting, we have 16 rounds to chant, some more. So it has a material aspect. Well, it doesn't really, but let's just say for argument's sake, it has a material aspect of counting, and you do 16 rounds. But how deep can you go in one round in meditation on Krishna? It's unlimited. Just like we've been discussing recently, isn't it, in Sankalpa Kaumudi, these different levels of meditation. So that is unlimited. And we're limited, and only by Krishna's grace can we embark on such a journey, swimming around in that ocean of devotion. Bhakti Smrita Sindhu, the ocean of devotion. Nitai Mata, we can desire unlimitedly for Krishna. Yeah, we can do. Actually, devotee, that's the mood of a devotee, to always want to offer more and more and more and more service to Krishna. Yeah. Never satisfied.
Sorry.
But,
if we ever go back, Radharani's dressed 10 times a day.
really?
Mm-mm.
So there you go. Plenty of Pujari service for everyone who's complaining they don't get enough opportunity to address the deities. If you go back to the spiritual world.
10 times a day. They was telling how I was listening to a class actually.
10 times a day?
Yes.
Well, that's a surprise. Okay, I'll take your word for that. I've read that before, but yeah.
Because Indra Maharaj said it in his class.
Okay, yeah. He's 10 times a day. So
yes.
So there you go. 10 times a day. So plenty of service. Yeah, there's no lacking in service. Yeah, okay. So then this finishes with we need not elaborate on this point any further. I think it's been quite well established, isn't it?
Yes.
The difference in the existence or the experience of the Brahmavadi compared to the devotee in devotional service. Yeah, this sentence here though, thus in spiritual life there is non-difference within difference and difference within non-difference. I didn't understand that. Can anyone help here?
I was thinking about that in Bhagavad Gita, the slok.
Yeah.
Action in action and in action and
yeah, we just read that recently.
Yeah, I was trying to figure it out with that,
He similarly offers an infinite variety of engagement for the external and internal senses of his devotees to add spice to their transcendental pleasure. Thus, in spiritual life, there is non-difference within difference and difference within non-difference.
Could we put it down as that word? I can't say it properly. Abeda, what is it, that word?
Yeah, Beta Tapa.
Attention.
Yeah, we can always invoke that it's inconceivable if we can't understand it.
Yes.
Sachincha.
I was thinking of that as well.
Yeah, so the experience of bliss, as I say, even when there's a great variety, within spiritual life, but within that difference, the experience of bliss is always there. Yeah. Anyway, something like that. All right, let's read 221. We can continue reading Bhava Chandravali if you want. 221.
221. May Krishna protect you. His opulent power is eternal, and eternal are his infinite varieties, and his beauty, and his worship, and his companionship with his servants. He is the personal form of eternal absolute, the one without a second, who lives in the eternal world. Commentary. In response to Gopkumar's inquiry, the Bhakti Sastras have described the glories of the personality of Godhead's devotional service. They now conclude their instruction by ecstatically offering Gopkumar their blessings. The impersonal, undifferentiated Brahman is actually a feature of the Supreme Lord. Because of the personality of Godhead manifests an all-attractive form, he is the concentrated essence of the Supreme. His body is the Supreme Brahman. Thus, although he is the eternal, unchanging Supreme, he also has eternal opulences, wonderful qualities that never fail him. Since he is the eternal and infallible head, his many varieties of beauty, splendor, and charm are eternal, and his qualities and activities are eternal as well. His consort, Lakshmi, is also eternal because she always resides on his chest. And as one further aspect of his eternal opulence, he always enjoys the sublime association of his devoted servants. This means that not only the Lord's attendant in Vaikuntha, but even his aspiring devotees in the material world are eternal, eternally graced by his mercy. They have no reason ever to fear destruction. This is affirmed by the Lord himself in the Bhagavad Gita 9:31. Kontiya pratijane na me bhakta pranashate. O son of Kunti, declare it boldly that my devotee never perishes. The Lord's worship, the process of devotional service, is also eternal. The activities in his practice of bhakti, hearing, chanting, and so on, are not merely functions of the material senses, but are manifestation of the Lord's direct mercy upon each sensory function. This will be explained more fully later on. The Bhakti Shastras offer Gopkumar their blessing that Krishna, whose abode in the spiritual world is eternal, may protect him, especially from obstacles to devotional service, such as distraction by the desire to be liberated.
Okay, so now we've been reminded, so all this time it's the Bhakti Sastras that they've been speaking. Now this is a summary verse here now, summarizing the whole conversation up to this point. Yes. Okay, anything here? There's something I was going to mention, but it just slipped my mind. Yeah, this verse here, Kuntaya Pajinahi Nami Bhakti Parnasyati. O son of Kunti, declare it boldly, my devotee never perishes. Yeah, anyway, it's eternal. The bodies may be temporary, but we would always experience devotion to the Lord life after life, if we have to remain here in the material world. All right, let's see where the conversation is going to go now. Perhaps I'll have a read now. 222. In this very gentle, supreme nectar of devotional service, the intelligent find no use for harsh and fawn-like logic. Still, we have spoken this discourse to induce those who are attached to impersonal liberation to begin devotional service, and we have spoken to give pleasure to the neophyte devotees of the Lord. All right, so that's us. I just remembered what I was going to mention as well, that as far as I've read, I read the Nectar of Devotion and books by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, of course, Srila Prabhupada's books. But this section here is the most elaboration I've actually come across in comparing the bliss of bhakti to impersonal Brahman realization. To the extent and the detail that Sanatana Goswami has got into to make this point very clear, it's quite phenomenal. You know? It's quite a wonderful description. Hopefully all of us who have been blessed to be hearing this or reading this, I hope you've all stopped trying to obtain moksha. And now we want devotional service. And also I was thinking as well, I didn't know whether to bring it up, it's a different subject a little bit, but the happiness and bliss that has been described about devotion. Also, as we know, there is feelings of separation, which externally looks like distress. But internally it's bliss and happiness. So it's very rich. The experience is very rich. You understand it? We've got the happiness of devotion, but then there's the emotions when Krishna's not present. And that churns another flavor of ecstasy, which is known as Vipralamba. It's another flavor of ecstasy. It's still ecstasy, but it's a different flavor. And externally, it manifests and looks like and sounds like the greatest anxiety you could possibly hear about. When you hear Radharani's lament for the absence of Krishna, etc. So, anyway, I was just going to, so it's like a bit like salt and pepper. It's like, if we can give that example.
At present, because we are in material world, we would kind of think about separation, anxiety, and all that in a material way.
Yeah, it's completely spiritual.
And then when we get to that stage, we will feel exactly like that.
Yeah.
One day.
Yeah. So it enhances it enhances the relationship. Yeah. It deepens the experience of attachment to Krishna, the separation. So yes, that's it. Can you please repeat again, Prabhu? Which part, Mother? Nidai Mata's got a bad voice. I think she's sick, so she's typing in here. I'm not too sure which part to repeat, but anyway, Hare Krishna, you can ask if you like. In the beginning, what beginning? Anyway, so Rupa Goswami. Oh, I guess. Oh yeah, I think I was just describing how this description of Sanatana Goswami this description of Sanatana Goswami, who wrote Brhat Bhagavatamrta, and his comparison of the bliss of Brahman in relationship devotional service is much more elaborate than given by Rupa Goswami in the Nectar of Devotion. And Rupa Goswami spends quite a bit of verses explaining the difference. But here, Sanatana Goswami has really taken that and expanded it in a wonderful way. in a wonderful way. And at the end, he said, kind of, what is the use? That's it. What is the use of speaking anymore? Where was it? Anyway, where was so not what is the use. So now we have concluded this thoroughly. It's been concluded. All right, now I've just been scrolling around. That means I've lost where I was. Krishna. Here, yeah. So certainly, hopefully, we've got some pleasure. Yeah, we're the neophyte devotees of the Lord, and hopefully we've got some pleasure in hearing this. Let's read this purport. Commentary. Using the four standard forms of evidence, direct perception, that's pratyaksha, logic, I think this anuman, the opinions of reputable authorities, and analogy. So the Bhakti Sastras could give many more proofs of the superiority of bhakti over moksha. But here they present only a small sample of those arguments. All right, so having said that, we're being told it's only a small offering in that regard. There's much more they could say. The Bhakti Sastras refrain from giving more because cold-hearted critical philosophy disturbs like a thorn one's relishing the sublime rasa of devotional service. All right, that's nice, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let's just hear more about Krishna directly, rather than just how insignificant Brahman is. Intelligent devotees avoid overindulgence in philosophical debates. But for the benefit of impersonalists and neophyte devotees, the Bhakti Sastras have taken the trouble to demonstrate by logic the superiority of bhakti. They have presented their arguments to induce persons attracted to the self-annihilation of merging into the Supreme, to turn instead to the process of bhakti. Yeah, this is, devotees are not so inclined for debate, although they can, when it's needed, speak about the superiority of bhakti in comparison to the impersonalist philosophy. And there has been debates between devotees and impersonalists, so, but generally, those are not so inclined. Yeah, like devotees generally, I'm sure some devotees have been, but generally, we don't go to Speaker's Corner every Saturday at Hyde Park for debate. No, we're too busy serving Krishna. We don't care for such things. You know, if you have a taste for it, you can have a go.
Thinking, isn't it so nice to be discussing? I was just thinking of how Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and what's his name?
Keshava Kashmiri, we brought it up yesterday, wasn't it?
And then on the other end, when we see Chaitanya Mahaprabhu with
Java Bhattacharya,
Bhaktacharya.
Bhaktisananda Saraswati Thakur.
Yeah, it must be really, I mean, this is like what we hear about Bhakti Sastras talking, but can you imagine what those conversations are? How
Yeah, very relishable to hear. Yeah,
I try to understand. I can't understand it, but to be able to part of it or something.
Yeah. All right, let's where was the reading to? Yeah. Okay. Without strong logical proofs, impersonalists will never be convinced to give up aspiring for liberation. Thus, following the logic given in Srimad Bhagavatam 1:15-34 of removing one form with another, kantakam kartakeneva, the Bhakti Sastras have used the sharp thorn of logic to remove the thorn of the desire for liberation, which pierces the hearts of the impersonalist. This discourse also helps neophyte Vaishnavas whose faith is not fixed. By hearing how much greater than moksha is bhakti, the hearts become filled with joy, and with their hearts thus freed from thorns of doubt, they become fit to receive the eternal treasure of pure devotion. The dualistic textbooks of the Nyaya school of philosophy give many hard-headed arguments based on the 4 types of evidence. Yeah, one time I was reading about Nyaya philosophy and trying to understand it. But at some point it became very dry, and it goes it's very, if you look at it, if you try to look at it in detail, it's so technical, and in the end it gets so laborious. Don't know how they apply themselves to it. In contrast, the monistic school of Vedanta philosophy presents fewer complex philosophical arguments, relying more on the one evidence of personal experience. So that's us, the monistic school. No, the monistic. That's the Mayavadis, isn't it? Yeah. In other words, the Nyaya presentation is harsh, karkasa, and the Vedanta. And the Vedanta presentation soft, komala, and the presentation of the scriptures that teach bhakti even softer, su komala. The bhakti scriptures seldom digress into philosophical argument. Such digression tends to agitate the mind and delay the maturing of pure Bhakti Rasa. So intelligent devotees use logical arguments sparingly. All right. So it's there in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Krishnadas Kaviraj uses logic to establish Krishna and Lord Chaitanya to be the Supreme Lord. He very much defeats the argument that Krishna comes from Vishnu. It's also there in my readings of the Sandarbhas by Jiva Goswami. Actually, Jiva Goswami, he does really get into logic. If anyone read the Tattva Sandarbha, he really gets into logic, and in the Krishna Sandarbha as well, he explains in such a detailed way how the position of Krishna and that Vishnu comes from Krishna. So it is there. But in comparison to, say, Jiva Goswami's writings on, for instance, the Priti Sandarbha, which is about the Bhakti Sandarbha, you've got the Bhakti Sandarbha, which is about Bhakti. Then you've got the Priti Sandarbha, which is about the mellows of devotion, of pure devotion, of love. Priti means love. He spends much more time, you could say, surfing the waves of explaining about the rasas than he does philosophical debate. But he really, Jiva Goswami, he really knows debate and the arguments he gives against other philosophies or philosophers. Anyway, going on a bit here now. Any comments or questions? Just experiencing, sharing my readings. I read Tattva Sandarbha, the Sandarbhas. I find it interesting, but interesting to read this, So intelligent devotees use logical argument sparingly. Yeah, I think I mentioned before, there's one devotee who's been since banned from our temple, actually, just recently. He was initiated by Bhakti True Swami. I won't mention names, but he's been reinitiated into the Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya. So he was coming to the temple challenging devotees, challenging the position of Vishnu in comparison to Krishna, saying that Krishna comes from Vishnu. Anyway, I think some of you might know. And I know him as a friend from many years, but I think I mentioned before, I didn't want to speak with him. It seems pointless, And here, so I've got some encouragement here. So perhaps Krishna was inspiring me not to waste my time in arguing logic and on these principles. Anyway, any comments from anyone else out there? Everyone's still out there?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Hare Krishna. 5 minutes left. Let's have a look. Let's have a look at this verse here. Okay, let's try and read this one. 223, 224. If you have indeed realized the pettiness of liberation and want to attain the treasure of firm faith and pure devotional service to the Lord, then simply worship your transcendental mantra. And please hear this great secret, which is pleasing to the heart. All right. With the help of the Bhakti Sastras, Gopal, like many before him, has now realized the insignificance of impersonal liberation. Yeah, so remember, he's kind of innocent. He hasn't been educated in these principles before. So now he's getting now he's being educated in these principles. Yeah. He is now ready to dedicate himself exclusively to pure devotional service and has set as his goal the highest ideals of bhakti. For this purpose, the Bhakti Sastras advise that he need only continue serving the mantra given to him by his exalted spiritual master. That mantra will surely fulfill whatever desire he may have, including desire for pure devotion. So we can read this like, for this purpose, your spiritual master has given you the Maha Mantra. He's given you, exalted spiritual masters has given us the Maha Mantra, and that Maha Mantra will surely fulfill whatever desires we may have, including the desire for pure devotion. Good. It may be true that the words and conduct of great spiritual persons should be accepted as authoritative. But without direct perception, one will be unable to realize the truths that great souls represent. Pradyaksha, yeah. Without first developing tattva gyan, scientific knowledge, one cannot acquire this experience. All right, there's something. Sometimes we're reading these details and it gets a bit, why do we have to know all this detail? But anyway, it described here, without first developing tattva gyan, scientific knowledge, one cannot acquire this experience, nor without tattva gyan can one who aspires for prema bhakti gain the strength to give up inferior attachments. Therefore, Gopal should faithfully chant his mantra, so that first he may achieve liberation, moksha, and then reach the final perfection. As the Bhakti Sastras are about to reveal, the liberation Gopal achieves will be personal. Thus he should not be repelled by the word moksha. All right, so now yes, Prabhupada's given everything. Nitai Mata mentions, yes. And Prabhupada's given everything, and he's given instruction in his purports to read Brhat Bhagavatamrta. He's given that, yeah. He said everyone who wants to know about devotion should read Brhat Bhagavatamrta. So we are following. Srila Prabhupada. Okay, so next week we're going to go into another discussion here. Let's just have a look. Description now of the universes. Yeah, I think now he's going to be speaking about the spiritual world. We're going into Goloka Vrindavan, I think. Okay, thank you, everyone. I hope this was of interest. I hope you was listening. I think you were. Hare Krishna, I'm sure you are. Hare Krishna. Okay, let's pause there and we'll continue next week, and have a wonderful devotional weekend, and we'll be together for Monday.
If you could do it, I think
yes. Okay. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare. Thank you. Hare Hare Bol. Hare Bol, Hare Bol.